So now let's look at how to determine using formulas whether a particular value is an outlier or not. So the important thing to remember is there's no absolute rule for something when something is an outlier and when it isn't. Sometimes things look a little high, sometimes they're extremely high, but generally you just kind of have to use some judgment, and different people might have different opinions on that. But we can always do some math. There are a couple general guides to identify potential outliers. So the first one is called the 1.5 IQR rule, which says that any value more than 1.5 IQRs above Q3 or below Q1 is a potential outlier. So to use this rule, you just calculate Q1 minus 1.5 times IQR, see if any values are under that. Similarly, calculate Q3 plus 1.5 times IQR, see if any values are above that. Similarly, but a little different, is the 2 standard deviation rule. So any value more than 2 standard deviations from the mean is a potential outlier. Now the sample mean, the notation we use is x bar, which is an x with a horizontal line over it. We pronounce that x bar. And the sample standard deviation is called S. So we calculate x bar minus 2 times S and x bar plus 2 times S. We see if any values are more extreme than that. So be careful not to mix these up. This one is 1.5 IQRs, but it's down from Q1 and up from Q3, whereas this one is 2 standard deviations. Both of those go from the mean. And that's just because, IQR is based on Q1 and Q3. S, the standard deviation, is based on the mean. So let's just go back to this data we saw before, our February data, and calculate this rule, because we already have all the numbers here. So the 1.5 IQR rule, to look at that lower bound, we'll just do Q1 minus 1.5 times, and then we select our IQR. We get 40.5. The upper bound, we'll just do Q3 plus 1.5 times IQR, and we'll get 60.5. And of course, I'm going to definitely need to center align those. So that tells us anything below 40.5 is a potential outlier for 2013, anything above 60.5. And the way I set this up, I can copy paste those over. Let's check and make sure those are referencing the right cells. Looks like they are. So according to this rule, the 61 degree day is a potential outlier for February 2013 because it's above 60.5. And if we go over here, we can order these. Just go to the Data tab, click A to Z. Notice my cursor is in the Tmax column, so it'll know I want to sort by Tmax. I just click A to Z. The minimum we see here is our 45, max is 61. So there's one day that might be an outlier, but it's a potential outlier because it's so close to this. I'm not sure you'd definitely call it an outlier. Let me just move this down a touch. So, and there is, well, hold on. Before we type anything, let's look. So for 2018, anything over 67.75 is a potential outlier. Let's sort those as well. But clearly there are no days over 67.75 because the max was 60. Were there any days lower than 31.75? Well, no, the Tmax went down to 34. There are no potential outliers for February 2018, at least for Tmax. If we looked at Tmin, maybe we'd get a different story. You can do that on your own if you're feeling fun. So let's just do similar. The 2 standard deviation rule says we'll take the mean, which I put up here. We will subtract 2 times the standard deviation. And for the upper bound, we'll take the mean plus 2 times the standard deviation. And then let's format those nicely as well. 1 decimal point should be fine. Let's center align them. And then we can copy and paste these as well. So we get similar numbers, but they're a little bit different. This says anything less than 43.1 is a potential outlier for 2013. Again, there aren't any days that were that cold. Anything that was over 58.2 is a potential outlier. So similar, but a little bit different, but we're going to conclude the same thing for this one. According to this rule, the 61 degree day is a potential outlier for February 2013. So they both agree for February 2013. Do they also agree for February 2018? And the answer is actually no, they're a little bit different. There were no days above 62.8, but there was one day lower than 35.2. So the 34-degree Tmax day in February 2018 is also a potential outlier. So none of the values here, even if we flag them as potential outliers, are really that far out. You know, like 35.2 versus 34, those are really close. So whether you call it an outlier or not, it kind of depends what rule you use and what your standard is. But these two calculations come up a lot, so just practice doing them a bunch of times and you'll have it down.